Bear with me, just doing reminder postings. Make sure folks
We're early birds today.
that need a ping, get a ping.
It looks like the beard's gathering. Only Florian, he hasn't got a beard. So where are the girls?
This guy is trying to look like Sam Han. He's got the whole moustache thing going on.
I have to have the longer ones this way. You know,
He's got the long moustache, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he's Japanese or Chinese, but we'll find out.
I could get a panda next time. So do y'all know each other? You know Graham?
Yeah.
It's 8 hours.
Yeah, I know Doug. I know Heiner. I know Tis. I've not met Jasvinder, but we've probably interacted a bit. I'm in a very noisy La Floresta, which is full of people and dogs. You know, not a mask in sight.
So they're not species distancing, huh?
Well, children everywhere. This is a place notorious because there's no police here because they gave up a long time ago. This is La Floresta is the home of comics in Spain, and lots of hippies here and all sorts of characters. So there's some mask wearers over there. Anyway.
Are we all in different time zones? Maybe so. Spain, Germany, London, West Coast, Michigan.
Germany, Spain, the same zone. Thijs is in Netherlands, so he'll be same zone.
Tis is eating, so he's on. Welcome, Gertrude. See, Heiner, you asked and you received.
Yeah, what do you ask for?
Some estrogen in the room.
Oh, estrogen. I've got lots of estrogen. They're all right. They're all around me here.
Why don't you invite them, Graham?
Well, I could do, but then I've got to deal with the whole Catalan English thing. He's enough. He speaks Catalan. He speaks German. He speaks Dutch. No.
Graham, did you see the video that I did for you on your Andros campaign?
I did, and I'm very grateful. Lots of very good people did sort of supporting me. I met the mayor, and
did it help?
He's so out of his depth. He's got no idea what he's doing, and I feel sorry for him. He just he's been programmed to say, "Where's the plan? Where's the money?" And I said, first of all, hello, my name's William. They can't say Graham in Greece, so I say, my name's William. I was born as soon as I say Scotland, everything's fine. And then he says, so what's the plan to invest? And I said, well, first of all, he's got to come here, and then we'll take the next. I mean, it's ridiculous. They're so desperate for money, the Greeks. It's
right.
It's sad, but it's also their culture. It's the way they think. It's the way they're so bad with, well, not all of them, of course, but many of them are just so bad at business. They just borrow money because the banks throw money at them. And then they build a business, go into massive debt, and then they've got no idea what they're doing. They think that selling souvlaki for €2.50, making 10 cents profit off every souvlaki is going to make them a king. Anyway, it's a long story, the Greeks, but it's. I'm now in Spain, so I'm not with them anymore. Catalans. Who are.
Welcome, Alex. You're a little bit dark there. There you go. Into the light. Isn't there a song with a title with a lyric like that? I'd sing it, but I can't sing.
Be alone.
That's right. So let's see where we are. We're 3 minutes after. We'll go a couple more minutes to see whether there are any stragglers. In the meantime, while you're sitting here, think about some blocks. What's the most recent burr up your butt? What's like, eating your kishkas? Giving you headaches? Or just plain aggravating the crap out of you? If any of such things exist in your life?
Must be a bunch. We got a bunch of early people here.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Heiner, is that flag to your right something I've seen before, or is that a different flag? Or is that a curtain?
You mean Europe?
That one.
What's that?
Right,
What's Europe?
is
What's
Europe.
Europe, Heiner? What's Europe, Heiner? What's that? What's that?
But I have another one with the UN, so I can hide and disguise. But in my back, it's from Mexico. I think it is from the early 70s, and it's still not fading in colors.
Well, just for the record, Heiner, I brought up a topic yesterday I would like to discuss with you. It's basically a teen congress. I think it might support some of what you've been doing. Hi, Kayla.
You were just saying teen congress?
Yes, it turns out that in one of my rants at my daughter one time, good rant, by the way, not at her, but with her, she suggested, why don't you guys just step aside and let us run the world? So I bought the domain teencongress.com, and I think it's actually a good idea.
Oh, here. Definitely.
Well, I just had an encounter with a lady from 2050. It's a small video. It is an alien observing us humans here running and spoiling the earth. I think it's only 3 or 5 minutes. My friend Jerk was just sending it. Maybe I play it for you because
Yeah.
I think we have to take our viewpoint out, and maybe your daughters can ally with this aliens from 2050.
I think it's a better idea than anything else I've heard so far.
I will send you the link in a moment. And I hope it's in English. I'm not sure.
You can do a share screen, and at the bottom of the share screen dialog box, on the bottom left, toward the bottom left, is a button that says stream computer audio to the share. So we would could watch it that way and hear it if you want to do that.
Doug, I'm not a newbie, but I first have to check out where it is, and maybe it's in German. So give me a pause.
Yeah, if it's in German, that would be of no assistance to me.
We only speak German in 2050. That'd be a disaster.
I can't imagine being a historian 30, 50, 100 years from now, looking back at this and trying to explain it. I don't think I could explain it.
These guys were severely lost, What were they talking about?
It's a wonder 1% of them survived. Yeah.
And they all live in Iceland. It's amazing.
Yeah, with the seeds, right? I think that's where the seed vault is.
Yeah, Microsoft.
Well, apparently
which was supposed to be secure and safe and buried in ice forever.
The DNA vault.
Except it thawed.
Well, apparently Nostradamus said that everyone will end up in Ibiza. Nostradamus has a prediction that we'll end up in Ibiza in Spain after the nuclear holocaust. But that's just one timeline, of course.
Well, that would only support about 50 of us.
Well, at least we'll have raids.
Well, you could get at least a million in Ibiza.
That's a crowded island.
And then, well, you've got up and down as well. It's a big island. The line the south. It's got the goddess of fertility as the goddess of Ibiza.
I was never on Ibiza, but I was on Palma one time, Mallorca. Great place.
It's very nice. Very nice.
So, Doug,
Yes, sir.
I don't think anybody has a clear block.
Well, go for it, Sam.
Good luck hosting this one.
I think I might just have to, start an argument with you again, Doug.
Well, you can do that. I like that.
I think
enjoy
everybody
that.
else is bored of it.
Something triggered somebody yesterday when universal income was mentioned, universal basic income. I think that's what triggered it. I'm not sure.
Was it? I remember it was mentioned, but I think the one that was triggered was this rule about don't talk about people who are not here.
Oh.
Yeah.
You mean the libel slander thing?
Yeah, which I commit on a regular basis.
I take full liability for any slander I submit. Not hoping that it'll harm anyone, but hoping that it'll get closer to the truth and unblock something.
Well, whose name did you want to use in vain, Sam, that you felt constrained from doing?
Well, I was talking about my daughters who were not present. What else? I could mention the person that I had the interaction with, but that person is not here. So I'd be violating it right away if I had discussed it. But I think I've been on record before as saying, in this rule of let's not talk about people who are not here, I think that's rather extreme. I don't think it's necessary to impose that on an absolute basis. So I have clarified my position on it before, that I do think that it's perfectly fine to talk about people so long as you do it with integrity. Both sides, the speaker and the listener.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
It means, with no misrepresentation in mind and with a positive outcome, intended.
Well, I like to talk about people who are not here. If they'd be okay, if they were sitting here, if they were sitting next to me, I would say the same thing, even if they were not present. So always trying to be constructive, even if it's negative, but saying, yeah.
I'm hearing a video playing. Is it yours, Heiner? And it's in German, so I wonder.
Yeah, I think it was.
Das auch, das ist in Deutsch.
I just muted you, Heiner. It's okay.
Well, Sam, would it concern you if I posted the link to the 10 Congress item you put on in the chat yesterday?
Not at all. The blog entry that I posted? Yeah, no, that's certainly fine.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat.
So Sam, would it not be satisfying enough to just refer to the person as person A? That seemed to have worked
Perfectly fine.
For the Southern District of New York.
Person of interest, you know what I mean?
No, the person who got convicted with Michael Cohen is referred to as person A when the whole universe recognizes that it's our surrogate president.
No, I think it was person one.
No, it was person A.
Person Q.
Yeah.
All right, let me be pointed then, and let me use Graham as an example, okay? If Graham were not here, and I said, I spoke with Graham last week, okay? I don't think that would be a concern, right?
Well, it depends on what you then next attribute to him.
Yeah, exactly. So whatever I attribute to him is up to me, and it's also up to you whether or not you accept it as fact. So
we didn't speak last week because you were asleep.
Right. I'm saying if, okay? So I'm saying, if it were factual, if it were not malicious, if it was meant in good intent, and if I'm talking about my daughter the same way, if I'm talking about my ex-girlfriend the same way, I don't actually have a problem with that. And I think that restricting conversations so that we never talk about somebody who's not here in any way is, in my view, too restrictive. So that's
what is the just to unpack it a little bit, what is the attachment or need for attribution in order to share whatever the exchange or meme was about?
It's factual. And it's, you know, it's adding detail. So much of the time when I talk in the abstract, people say, oh, don't talk in the abstract, talk personal, bring it down to earth, get detailed, talk about your personal experience. And yet at the same time, there's, oh, don't use names, don't use references that we can, you know, untangle. I think that's a bit of a morass. So I actually think that as long as you're dealing with truth, as long as you're dealing with good intentions, as long as you're not misrepresenting, and as long as the listener is smart enough to say, okay, that sounds plausible. Wait, let me question this. Let's not take everything one person says coming out of their mouth as absolute truth. Then I think you have responsible parties on both parts, and both can lean into that conversation. But to assume that, you know, you can never talk about someone, never use a name, simply because what you say is going to be out there in the world and it's absolutely true and it's going to damage someone, you know, and it's always going to be wrong. I think that's unnecessary.
Alex, you raised your hand.
Yeah, well, I think we have our own internal flag mechanism when we start sharing about somebody else and when they're not present in the conversation, and it's telling us whether or not what we're projecting is gossip or hearsay, and you know, it's not going to contribute to the moving forward of the project or the unblocking. So that's the internal intuition. You know what you're talking about somebody else who's not here. You know whether or not what you're saying is character building or destructive, harmful or hurtful. Over.
So I'm gonna give you a different sort of reason. So we had my niece and nephew and their infant daughter over, and my niece and another niece, and they were playing with this very small child, and one of my nieces was videoing, and she's a religious videoer of that generation, posts everything all the time, and the video was shared by my other niece, who was the person featured in it playing with her daughter. And in the background was me looking like a extra from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I mean, it was disturbing enough for me to see me. Not that I'm particularly vain, and I live out loud. There really isn't anything private, but it was just sort of gruesome, and there was just something ominous about it. I looked like this weird, dangerous, you know, character slumped down in the background as an amorphous lump. It was just horrendous, horrendous. And I pinged my niece who put it up immediately and said, don't know whether you would mind, but please take that down. I wasn't, you know, in being videotaped mode. I'm sort of not okay with that being out there in any way, shape, or form. And she immediately took it down. However, had there been a reach out and a solicitation and a request beforehand, I don't know, I probably still would have taken the same position, but I'd at least like the choice. And so individual agency, individual authority, control over name, likeness, biographical information, not to pull the lawyer out of my background, but you know, having control over me in personam, including my name, is, I think, a really important idea. And somebody using it in vain, even if like wonderful and positive and all of that, but in a, you know, fixed, you know, replicable, distributable, disseminatable, once it's out of the box, it's out of the box way, without my prior permission, is sort of a challenge. I just don't think it's fair play. If my value alignment is that every single man, woman, and child on the planet owns their right to their own agency in all expressions and facets thereof.
it's a debatable point. I'm not sure the team wants to do it at the point, but I'll go on record and say it's debatable. I think that you might find that there's a more nuanced position that we could actually arrive at, but it's one that I think is unnecessarily absolute if you take extreme positions on this. Over.
Colin, you raised your hand. Thank you for doing that, by the way. And Graham, after you.
Yeah, I like this topic because
I knew you would.
yeah, and I say like in space quotes. A lot of things. Doug, welcome to what it feels like to not be the host in that picture on Facebook.
Also, the one person in the room without their camera on. So
yeah, well, I don't have a camera on this device today. Yeah, so yeah, I think that feeling you had was similar to not being in control of what was going on. You didn't have consent, pre-consent, and as the host of this show, you're very comfortable. So you definitely did not feel like the host in that picture. So, and Sam has a as well. He errs on the side of facts and interesting and embellishment. Why not? It's what happened. I think it completely depends on the group that you're with, and if you want to be mentioned, if that's appropriate at the time. I don't think recording everything is actually as valuable as other people, but it depends on the reason why. So I think that's the thing to discuss. Like, why would we want to do that here? So what are you going to do about it, and what is the norm? Do we actually even know what the norm is at this space? And if things start going sideways, do you know what to do? Right? Like, and you could apply that to any space. And so interesting here because it is so free that almost anything could happen. Granted, I think everybody here is genuinely leaning in and trying not to provoke unnecessarily. But, yeah, it's very interesting, this space and the conversations we've had and the things that have happened here. And do we have any takeaways yet on this topic of what do we expect and what can we do if something goes sideways or starts to? Anyway, thanks.
I saw your mouth, Graham, Doug. I didn't hear you because you're on mute.
I was calling it on you because you had raised your hand. So
Yeah, I think consent is going to be such a huge topic for years to come. Not only when it comes to personal space and online, but also with VR and AR that come in, and then also when telepathy becomes normal, it's like you give consent to access the way you think and what's happening. People can use anything, and it's very loud behind me, so I hope you can hear me. But the in Portugal, they say there's no community without gossip. But then in Greece, gossip can destroy people. I mean, it can destroy a business, it can destroy anybody, and they actively engage in it because they all want to be kings. And then I've had plenty of people maliciously gossip about me, and I'm used to that. And one person diluting the story about who I am or who any of us are can really affect people to say, I don't know, I can't trust that guy because person X said this and he said that. So, well, actually, I didn't. You only have to talk to me, and then how do you trust me? I mean, I might be lying. So it takes time to build that trust. I'm told that in Greece, for example, it'll take me a year before they can actually say this guy consistently does what he says he'll do. And then in other spaces, like I was talking this with a gamer, in gaming, they trust each other very quickly because there's no physical threat to them. There's no, they can just log off or log back on again. So in other worlds, reputation, it's like, all of us have been doing this kind of work for such a long time. And I think the sort of public persona, or who people think we are and what we do and how we do it, is very confusing. I mean, for example, someone like Fleming, who's not on here, but Fleming Fleming's unable to lie, and so because of that, he's able to, get respect. John Keldon, he just constantly, metronomically posts the same stuff. You know what? You can trust John to do that. I cannot trust John Keldon, if you listen to this. I can't trust you to shut up and listen to somebody else, but I can trust you to metronomically post stuff. The same goes for any of us. So it's like how the internet perceives us, how the algorithms will, in years to come, as the algorithms listen to all of this, say, oh, it's the same guys again. There they are. We can trust them because they keep showing up. So it's, I could go on for days about this, so I'll shut up. But thank you, Colin, for that. That was very useful.
Welcome, Stacy. We don't see you, and you're muted, but I'm assuming you're here.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm getting ready. I'm listening in the background. Thank you.
Perfect.
I don't know about trusting somebody just because they consistently show up. I mean, that we've got Trump to look at for an example there. Over.
Doug, I'm blocked because I have a question. I recently came into the scene of discussing what is safe space, what is free space. There has to be, with Brett Weinstein in the Congress, with ranking member Jordan, some discussions on what has been happening on the Evergreen State College riots, and how all these original intentions of freedom to speak, of including colored people, has been all put topsy-turvy. And for me as an alien, I cannot understand at all. Can you give me some enlightenment?
It's actually a really big question. And at least from what I've empirically experienced, even the most purportedly advanced, level-upped, conscious, self-aware, bleeding edge, event horizon leaders and, top social cue thought makers, and, doesn't matter where on the political spectrum anybody lies, but under stress, under challenge, like the world that we're in right now, pretty much everybody has this capacity to revert to old paradigm hierarchical projection and assertion of power, authority, and control over others. And that's not confined and restricted to the extreme right or the extreme left politically. It seems to be, endemically human that people do that. And I forget who it was who was talking about this part of Seattle where they sort of declared themselves an independent state. And the first thing they did was set up barricades and checking people coming in. And like, exactly what are you purporting to demonstrate against if you're replicating it? If you're applying all the same principles of exclusion and control and authority and over your 6-block domain, then how are you not perpetrating the same forms and protocols and paradigms that you're supposedly reacting to? And my brother-in-law, who happens to be the chief of police in the town that he lives in, made the comment, and then somebody was killed in that 6-block area, and the first thing they did was call the police. He was like, how does that work? If this whole thing is against the police and defund the police, then why is it you called the police when you were confronted with something that, you felt fell outside of your scope of capacity to handle and deal with it, like if you want to do away with all authority structures in society in service to civil order or maintaining civil order, then how are you in alignment with what you say you want to do? So I think it's just an innate human reaction to fear, and nobody's exempt, no matter what their purported values are. That would be my answer to your question.
Well, I don't think you answered it at all. You see, for me, this evergreen state college things, that it goes to the American Congress, that ranking member Jordan puts it up and discusses free versus safe versus open spaces, is so central. And I think it's putting my whole worldview topsy-turvy. Is anyone aware of this? Maybe you know a little bit about it. Kelia or whoever is around, or Colin, I was such a surprise that all my definitions of free and open are really misused by in-groups, or I don't know, I don't even have enough insights to know what it's about. It seemed to be a very interesting experiment to involve colored people. And then a lot of funding policies between colleges and universities came in. So, Doug, I didn't hear any answer to my question.
Can I try and something? There's a heavy influence on policy coming from the far right, which is influenced by the heartland states, a lot of deeply religious fundamentalists, and they want control to be observed. They want security. They want people watching everything everyone else is doing. They want to know everything and collect data on everyone, all your movements, all your visits to whatever website you go to, and nothing hidden by privacy and the dark web. They want to get rid of that, make everything open. The problem that is that removes people's privacy to communicate freely with their colleagues in business and in privacy and in pleasure, in personal affairs and business affairs. So there's your issue. The far left want a private virtual service, and the far right don't want you to have that. They want you to have they want a cookie on everyone's computer recording everything. But that's a bit of an exaggeration. But that's a corporate interest too.
Jim Jordan is a dyed-in-the-wool Trumper. He's a moron. I mean, par excellence, and I don't generally revert to slandering. But he's a bona fide dyed-in-the-wool moron, and ethically and morally bankrupt. And so this is an Orwellian inversion by the extreme right, who've been engaged in this 4chan anarchist, nothing is meaningful and everything is just chaotic for fun. And so, I mean, specifically, if you want a response to him, it's the social media, channels started to actually do something barely enough that they should have done starting 2 years ago or 3 years ago, which is flag Trump stuff for hate speech or for false fake news or for whatever. And all of a sudden, these extremists on the right are whining and complaining that that's an infringement of their freedom of speech. So it's sort of a perversion of civil rights and the Constitution in the hands of, putting a gun in the hands of a bandit. That's all that is. So I don't really engage with that level of machination, because I just consider it an unworthy spending of time and attention. But I think the larger frame and the larger issue is actually what people do in the face of, fear and chaos. And I mean, those folks are obvious in their insanity and aggression and stupidity, but there are vastly more reasoned, intelligent people that all of us know who are just as guilty of being just as outrageous, but accepted because there's a larger constituency of intelligent, reasoned people that they're part of the same club with.
Thank you, Doug. I realized at least some part of an answer, but still I don't get what the Weinstein brothers are into that. Is it this fight of science and spirituality? Or is it more basic, basal, or however you call it? So what is really going on? It is not the blacks are bad, the whites are right. It is really putting the whole frames of references for us aliens like me topsy-turvy.
Well, I want, Colin, you raised your hand. I want to give you the mic, but I'll respond to that if there's an opening.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
The whole gestalt of the extreme right Christian fundamentalist it's really neo-Nazi with a veneer, that has been driving the Trump administration, the Jim Jordans of the world, in the US, is, some smart cookies in those movements realized that if they got rid of all the old tropes and came up with new South American euphemistic language for things, and just, it's sort of literally this mind-bending inversion. So good becomes bad, black becomes white, newspeak, right? Orwell predicted this a long time ago, because he saw it in World War II. He saw the Germans do it in Nazi Germany. It is literally a wholesale dismembering through gaslighting of any norms. Facts are no longer facts. News is no longer news. Science is no longer science. Nothing is what it once was. Everything's been destroyed, effectively. And the birth of that actually came out of 4chan. It came out of the gamer culture, where when you're in games, you're not in reality and anything goes. And so the most dystopic and chaotic, insane stuff was a way of amusing themselves. And it sort of blurred out, like my background and me, reality and fiction and fantasy. And so very real things have since become meaningless. There is no longer, you see these public officials getting up in the face of COVID and going, don't you people understand that, like, this is a disease and it'll kill you? And there are people that will rabidly aver that that's not the case. According to Donald Trump, it's like the flu and it's no big deal and you can just ignore it and go about your business. And, we're headed toward 2.2 million casualties, which is what they predicted when it first hit in January. They said if nothing is done, US will see 2.2 million casualties. Well, guess what? We're in a state where our country is doing nothing. Token testing, token protective gear, no face masks. We're effectively in a state official federal executive branch policy do nothing. So we're looking at 2.2 million people dying between now and I figure January or February when this thing gets a full head of steam. And I don't think I'm being alarmist. That's what the science said in January. And you have people like getting into political fights because they've been fed a constructed argument that somehow wearing a face mask is an abrogation of their civil rights, their personal freedoms. It's just, it's insane. It's insane. And it's gospel to them. They actually think that makes sense. They may not be particularly educated. And all of the leaders of the extreme right movement wear face masks, by the way, and observe social distancing whenever you see a camera on them. But the people that they're inciting to kill themselves by exposing themselves to this disease, no problem. No moral challenge or qualm there. I'm complete. I think that answers your question.
No, that doesn't answer his question.
Okay, well, go ahead. Go ahead, Colin.
But I really like your deep analysis there, Doug. That'd be interesting to paint what that looks like in different contexts. And I think that there's a whole 3 or 4 shows right in understanding what you're getting at, which is important. What Heiner's referring to is the thing that happened at Evergreen, and it was about it turned into something about safe spaces, but it was basically a tradition they had called the Day of Absence, where all the Black people would go off campus and discuss how things could be improved. And so basically they weren't there and people would notice that they weren't there, and it probably had various effects without getting into detail. The controversy was in 2017, I think they decided that they wanted to switch it so that they asked the white people not to show up. And that's not consent. And I don't need to go any farther than that. Brett Weinstein said that he would be there on the Day of Absence, and it's a totally different matter. What does he say? I think it's quoted here. Sorry, I don't have my glasses on either. There's a huge difference between a group or coalition deciding to voluntarily absent themselves from a shared space in order to highlight their vital and underappreciated roles. The theme of Douglas Turner Ward play Day of Absence, as well as the recent Women's Day walkout and the group. So yeah, there's a totally difference between that. The first is a forceful call to consciousness, which is of course crippling the logic of oppression oppression. The second is a show of force and an act of oppression in itself and of itself. He said, this is what I wanted. On a college campus, one has the right to speak or to be, must never be based on skin color. So the right to speak or to be. So that's what he was standing up for, because they flipped a coin on something that was consentful for a group of minorities to absent themselves. And then they said, hey, why don't we make the majority absent themselves today? And it feels very reminiscent of some of the black and white logic that you get, that I find is very frustrating when you're trying to understand things. So, I could talk about what did I put here? Comment. Is it possible that that with the human differences and the fear that people have, which was an earlier topic that Doug was answering, I'm wondering if the go-to tool of the past wasn't something like religion, where people would band together and feel part of their tribe and they're religious, and they would have their structure and they would feel comfortable within those borders. And I'm wondering if today we have less religion to justify us being right, our religion being right or whatever. I don't know. So it's interesting. And I do think that it's difficult to get the proper message, Heiner, in today. And so I think that's something I see that that's quite valuable in some of the new podcasts and things like long form podcasts. And so I think there's going to be a signaling towards the more notable news. But then again, are we just academics enjoying understanding while other people are just, you know, they turn the channel whenever they see that particular format. So yeah, it's hard to say who's informed about what, but yeah, I think that's what you were asking about the day of absence. And as far as safe spaces go, something I've wondered for quite some time here. I've watched some other shows. I call this a show because we're broadcasting, but they do show the squares of the people who aren't here, so the people watching later know who is here, and they can actually see if you put your hand up and things like that as well. Actually, I don't even know. I think like right now it comes up to my square. That I would like to have as a different picture. You know, so if there's, I put a background, but it'd be nice if I could put a map there or something, but I can't control this space, right? But so I do the best I can. So there might be some protocols we could look at how we deal as it gets bigger, and how, you know, talk time was a tool, or passing the stick, as Heiner has mentioned before, things like this, but to make everybody in the space feel present and part of the conversation. If they choose to be, other people might just want to say, well, I just want to listen. So they're not actually in the round table until they raise their hand or something. I don't know. It's very interesting with spaces and safe spaces, and misinterpretation of what the spaces are, misinterpretation of what the questions are. So anyway, thanks.
Well, Colin, I think you got a little bit closer to my concern. The central concern is, I know very little about the US 50 years or so, is how do we include? When I go in Upper Harlem, early 70s, and a black is going, I go on the other side. Or when I'm black, a white is coming, he's going on the other side. And we are trying now with For Futures, Fridays for Futures, Parents and Elders for Futures, to really have a free day for thinking without the job, without school, to really develop ourselves. And there are all these things of who is included, who is excluded. All this me in, you out games are so incredible. And when I studied the early history of the Evergreen State College and how the funding works in the US academic and in university and research system, I found this is a bonanza of seeing what is actually going on when we have no freedom and no liberties and no all these humanistic drives, and people misuse our concepts and even our terms like safe and open and free. I mean, I'm totally disgusted, and I am so alienated about it. And I don't even know who of you even heard about such colleges. Maybe you have, but definitely 99.9% of European visitors will have no idea what this, how do you say, riots were about.
Well, I think the college was a unique situation where they really tried to have an open type of curriculum. I think Sam knows about the Montessori. Is that correct? As well, that's another type of alternate education framework. So maybe, you know, Sam could talk about that, but how if he keeps up on Brett, I believe Weinstein, if I'm not mistaken, and him and his wife were professors at that college. And yeah, there's some really good articles on that. There's a couple of long Joe Rogan podcasts on that. He also has his own, I think his own channels, and I think his brother had him on at the Portal as well. So yeah, they're quite a niche set of information. They're part of what's called the dark web. There's a few of them, and I guess it's the intellectual dark web. You can look into that. It's a terrible name, I think. Anyway.
There's an issue when the forces that come out of the shadows, the shadow world forces, want to incite people's hatred with each other because to divide and conquer art of war tactics. And if you can resist that temptation, then you understand that it's better to be inclusive and not prejudiced, not racially prejudiced either, against others' desires to follow a certain path or religion. The danger is fundamentalism. So it's a matter of being more resilient to the shadow forces that want to drive a wedge between us. If they succeed, then it makes it more difficult for people to unite together in love and fellowship. There's a great desire and yearning for fellowship in the community, especially by people who live alone, people who get elderly and their families have all disappeared, and even young girls that are ostracized from their family for going out with the wrong boy. So there's a huge amount of people who love the idea of fellowship. You've got an ace up your sleeve if you can get involved and encourage fellowship in your community, whether it be virtual in the virtual cloud or in the local hall down the road. Alba.
Heiner, I have a follow-up for you if you're there. I'm not sure whether you still are. You must be. Can you say more about specifically what language you felt was co-opted? Heiner, you there?
I didn't understand that. It's a question for
Well,
me.
you said you felt that language and terms that you've around safe and around open and around all of this have been co-opted, have been somehow perverted or twisted. Can you say more about your experience of that?
It's just a personal experience, because whatever I called open and free and personal was misused in this capital American Congress hearings. And you see, we from Germany don't look at this in all details and don't know all the history, but we know the history of alternative schools, not only Steiner and Montessori, where they try to do something wholeheartedly and with good conscience, or however you call it, and then it goes into such a public hearings environment, which are, for me, just disgusting. So I cannot really say what this term means for me in this situation there, but the general situation of what we felt we should do with the first Steiner school in California in the mid-70s or so, and how this is misused in not understanding what is science, how they have science wars, how they put Carl Sagan as something like a crazy scientist because he's a generalist and doing multi-track diplomacy with the Russians, when we are all in our silos and our dogmas and our terms and fighting. No, I didn't get your question, Doug.
Well, I think you answered it. Yeah, Sam. Oh, Stacy. After Sam? Stacy, Sam, you want to go first? Stacy, you want to go second? Or Stacy, did you raise your hand first? And I just didn't move my eyes fast enough. Oh, you're on mute, Stacy.
I can't see. Sam, did you want to go first or should I go?
I've been stacking up a number of things, but I'll just go longer after you go.
Okay, I'll be really short because Heiner just hit on something for me that brought me back to something Doug said. And I really want to push back against the idea that people that are not in fear of the virus are anti-intellectual or not smart. Many of them really, really are. But I think we're making a big mistake automatically assuming that. The issue that I'm having is that I feel half of us are manipulated by media and half of us are manipulated by our egos. And there are a lot of really smart people in this anti-mask movement. And from my perspective, I feel it's that they're being hijacked by their egos. So while they're out there fighting for this absolute right to not wear a mask, they don't recognize that they've been distracted. So while our courts are taking away all our freedoms and allowing there to be, protesters to be locked up indefinitely, there's nobody there fighting that because they're too busy fighting over a mask. And, but to say that they're not, it's not that they're not smart, it's that there are truths in everything. So they're just looking at different pieces. So, and because we're not talking, we're each getting hijacked into all these different areas. So I just, I'll stop there and I'll let Sam talk, but maybe we'll get back to that whole idea later of, it's interesting. I just want to say one more thing. It's interesting to me because I think there are people in groups that when they no longer have this one enemy to fight and they start talking to each other, they're going to realize how many things they actually disagree on, and they're not going to like each other very much. With that, I'm complete for now.
I was caught by your reference, Doug, to gamers being the initiators of this whole phenomena. I actually questioned that because I didn't see it that way. To me, the assault on truth and trust happened way before that. So I think that the gamers, I haven't really seen 4chan and others and Anonymous. I haven't really seen that betrayal of trust. And so far as I've seen, the anonymous actions, I can't find too much fault with them. There always seem to be, for me, on the side of people, justice, transparency, anti-corruption, etc. And the reason I kind of think it goes way before that is even before technology arose to the point where people actually could play games in these virtual wars, there were other places where people were kind of playing around with this notion of truth. This truth being, okay, it's true for me, right? Therefore, don't tell me what's true for me. And there begins the slippery slide of, well, the truth must be questioned because obviously I have mine, you have yours. And that's a start to basically questioning any place truth is important. And I think that historically has been way before the gaming phenomena really came around. So even this whole notion of political correctness or taking offense is borderline questioning truth. And that's why I say, if you let truth be your guide, then let us show up authentically with our, leaning in to sort of understand, what it is that we disagree about, what it is that, I think I believe, what I think you believe, et cetera, and let's get to that deep rocking idea. I think that is useful. But to say something is, not true for me, and therefore it's either politically offensive or it's rubbing me the wrong way, or it's, not a safe space, those are all ways that we can sort of play around with this notion of truth. And I find that slippery slope started decades ago. So for me, if we were going to really try and figure out where it is we want to base our dialogue, do we want to do it from a position of power? It used to be that way for thousands of years. Many smart people have said there's better ways than that. Do we want to base it based on, authority from a deity? Again, for millennia, it's been that way. And only recently, since the quote unquote enlightenment, but it really goes back 4,000 or 5,000 years, with reasoning and careful thought, what otherwise would call critical thinking, embodied in the form of a scientific inquiry and really leading in to really observe the
It's
universe
9
around
hours.
us. Sorry. And observe the universe around us to really understand what the universe is telling us, i.e. God. That's what God is telling us, okay? If you really want to understand, do it that way. But we all know the downfall of relying on power or relying on religion or relying on familiarity or relying on even intuition. That's another one where the truth comes into a defensive position. Intuitively, I know I'm right, okay? Intuitively, everybody knows they're right. It's not a useful notion to take to an extreme. And this constant questioning of scientific method and the truth is dangerous, and that's led us to where we are today. So if I want to speak about facts, question that, okay? But if it is factual, allow it. That's the position I'm taking with, all of this mealy-mouthed wording of, should I mention that I had a conversation with somebody, or should I mention that we talked about this topic, or should I mention that we had a slight, clarification of that topic, or should we mention that we had a disagreement about that topic, or should we mention that we went on for 20 minutes about that topic? It's a gradual increase. And where do people learn to, draw the line? I say, let's really be careful about our respect for truth, because if we don't allow that, that's what got us into this mess that we're living in today. And let's not be mealy-mouthed about it. It starts with subjective truth, quote unquote. It starts with, my intuition, compels me, blah, 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 We can talk about all of these things as though they're very healthy, very spiritual kind of notions. But in essence, they're actually finding ways to be right without being grounded in the truth. And I think that is where the danger lies. Over.
You're muted,
Stacy,
Doug.
Colin had his hand up first, and then you. Colin? Colin? Yes, no?
Oh, sorry. I thought I was on. I like what Heiner has brought up, this idea of spaces and truth and free speech, and the misinterpretation of one's intentions as well. Taking what you say, your free speech, and misinterpreting it. Like he said, what was the intentions of their work in California with the school. And, Sam had so many things ready to say and follow up on. He needs a map so that he can tick every one of those nodes and say, okay, here's what I got to say about this. Here's what I got to say about this. That map has to be built in live time, and we have to suffer that map if we want that. In certain conversations, I would suggest it. Stacy had a thought meme about what it is to be X, I'll say, without speaking on her behalf. And is there a way that we could put a meme on that to say, because there's so many clever quotes and clever memes and I look for these so that I can speak less. So, if you could say, oh, Stacy, you're talking about the blah, blah, blah. Sam tells me, he says, oh, that's part of the four appreciations, or what is that, Sam, again? I can't remember.
The four agreements.
The four agreements, right. The four agreements that you should appreciate. And so, if we could say, oh, Stacy, you're just talking about the four agreements, or, Doug, you're just talking about, annihilation and, hopelessness of the world today. If we could just stamp where that topic is going, so that we could grow on top of those models and memes, as Heiner says, you have to back away because you don't want to be in your silo. You want to be able to look at it from multiple So if we're spending all our time explaining the same term and not lifting up to a different level to say, okay, here it is on the map. We've discussed it 7 times. Let's put a joke beside it. Because I think once things become frustrating enough, you start to get a little bit cranky about them, and you start to get a little bit sarcastic. And then you start to, what do you call it? I guess, making jokes about it. So that's not really appreciated, but it really gets to what Sam was saying about, the right to offend somebody is keeping us from the truth. If you go up against something, there's like four things you can expect. First, they'll ignore you, then they'll try to make fun of you, and then they'll try to sabotage you. And then finally, if it has merit, you'll get your way through to the end. So, within these kinds of memes, there's patterns of conversation and communication. And I think we could use those stronger if we could hold up these things. Like Stacy was saying this. They do it for fallacies. There's a bunch of fallacies. So you get into a conversation, I see this on shows where, you start going down, they'll stop you. Wait, hold on right there. Are you committing the, fallacy from authority? Or are you committing the special pleading fallacy? That's a common one. So, if we could actually think in senses of these terms, we could get a lot farther in these conversations. I find we scratch the surface, then we have, just end up explaining the same things over again, saying more and actually, or speaking more and actually saying less. So I'm looking for the opposite. How can we make memes and tools and things so that we can follow up on these conversations? Like, I'd like to, I too, like Doug, I'm interested in what Heiner is digging at with this trigger he has against Evergreen. I'd like to see that blossom into its, full potential of a discussion, and how we would follow that up, and maybe, mark these conversations and have them in the future, or we can continue on just having random conversations. Like, is there room for both? Or is there more time to talk? Is there a smarter way to talk so we can speak less and say more? Anyway, that's kind of my constant rant about being here and finding interest but frustration of recognizing the space, because gamers, they're imagining new virtual space, not negating reality. In fact, some of what they're doing becomes reality. So anyway.
So I want to just go back to, I wanted to add on to what Sam was saying about science, but I'll do it in the way that Colin asked. So the meme that I would use is, I don't know what I don't know, because that's how science approaches things. And I think that if we were more like science, we'd be in a much better starting point. I'm complete.
Alex?
I know that there's a value in the community where people want to get along with each other and produce cooperation, and to value the product that people come up with, and the generosity and the creativity in the community. So nothing is free, even freedom of thought, because it all comes with a cost. There's a consequence to everything we say and think. Our opinions have a consequence. And so the idea of something being free is a misnomer, I believe, because this is the responsibility we all carry to have a cohesive community and to be able to work together. Over.
Yes, sir.
So Colin, in a direct response to you, some of you are aware that I've been collecting, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really, this list of things I call smart people problems. But what I haven't told you is there's another attendant list called dumb people problems. And I think you just alluded to one of them, the fact that people—
Hold on. Could you say that again? The audio dropped out and it was a joke.
Really? You didn't hear that? I said, attendant to the list of smart people problems, I've been collecting another list of dumb people problems. And these dumb people problems are things that I see that really expose a lack of critical thinking or even logic, even basic logic. Things like, always going to a binary or assuming there's an opposite when there's a classic mistake called the excluded middle, or otherwise in mathematics called the kernel space. So there are very deep logical fallacies that people drop into and say, this is true when, basic understanding of logic and reasoning, or even the fact that words are not absolutely specific. If people take words and terms to be absolutely specific without understanding, they're just human constructs, they're tools, they're imperfect, And to expect them to have a perfection that then can be applied into perfect logic, that's another fallacy. So there's a lot of mistakes people make when they talk. Even, I won't go into the entire list right now, but there is an attendant list. And the reason it's important is that each of these things keeps us from, quote, the truth, unquote, with a capital T. And I will say this is very important. The importance of truth, I think, is undervalued in our society. I would say even worldwide, because it's more than just the United States. And it's been happening for decades. It's not a recent phenomenon. In fact, you could argue the authorities in religious organizations don't so much value truth as they value power. Because they think they're doing a good thing. They think they're teaching people how to coexist among themselves, but it's also creating problems with other people who are not part of that same religious organization. So I think valuing coexistence and valuing truth, to me, are kind of bubbling up to being really probably at the top of my list. But I just wanted to make that reference to dumb people problems because it's a growing list. Over.
But that's what you call punching down. And
no, I'm not punching. I'm just documenting.
Okay.
Well, I'm just wondering how many dumb people you interact with.
I just look at what's being reported in the media. I look at all the videos being shared on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. I don't have to go out into the street and see it. That's the wonderful thing about our technology today. I mean, I don't know if you guys know, but a recent hashtag on Instagram or Twitter cost me an hour or more yesterday was Karen's Gone Wild. I think there's a hashtag called hashtag Karen's Gone Wild. And I spent over an hour watching those videos yesterday. I'm not saying that's the generality. I'm just saying there are several instances, and there are many, and they are getting posted. And we didn't used to have this. It used to be my own personal experience, but I didn't have a video camera at that time. I grew up my entire life with these kind of experiences. Many not as severe as what we're seeing today being perpetrated on Black people. No, I can't say that all the time, okay? But some come close. And most of them are much more subtle. But it's now in the public eye. So I don't have to go very far to find these examples, Stacy. Over.
Oh, I totally agree. But I also want to hit on something that Doug said earlier about this kind of thing going across the board. I'm not talking about racism, but I want to use a different example of where you just channel. For example, I had something on my page, somebody who didn't wear a mask, but he had a gun. And, there were people wishing him ill. There were, there were people wishing him ill that say that they're very spiritual people and loving and compassionate, and yet they're hoping that somebody will die. Now, I was upset with the guy. I put it up on the thing, but I wasn't putting it up there because I was wishing him ill. I actually wanted to start a conversation to get people to kind of look at things maybe a little bit differently, because I don't think everybody's all wrong and everybody's not all right. And I know for me, I get really, when I think I'm right, I think I'm right. It's hard to sway me. But I also know that I'm taking a lot of effort to try and fight against that. The same way those of us that call ourselves white allies are trying to look, is there some racism inside me that I don't know about? we're recognizing that, hey, there may be something I'm not aware of. And I think that's the difference with different kinds of people. And those kinds of people have all different kinds of opinions. They're not just in one block. So that's where I am, just trying to get myself to second guess myself, which is part of the questions at the gate. You know, are you sure it's true? And trying to bring that to other people's attention, because I think we all want to do better. At least the people that I interact with, the people here in this space, I know we all want to do better. I believe, that's my suspicion, that we all want to do better.
Josh?
Good to see everyone on a Sunday. I'm just saying hello, and I just got triggered, and I figured since it's Sunday Unblocking, I won't hold it for longer than 2 seconds. And the word white allies just triggered the hell out of me. Sorry, I don't know, just that word, that expression, white allies, like we're humans, we're friends. But separating it to be a white ally is a separation. I'm sorry, that's just too separate. That's just too not. There's equality and there's equity. Black people never got their equity. White people got their equity. Now they're searching for equality. Black people have been trying to get equality forever. Now that they're starting to get equality, they want equity. But by separating it, let's just be one person. Let's just be human beings and just stop even the conversation. I just think I'm sick of it. I'm sorry, racism. Like, I just hung out with Filipinos, Mexicans, white, like, who cares? Like, can we just move on? So I just wanted to, I can't hold back. If I hear white ally again, I'm going to call those people racist and just stop the whole racism. Just stop it. Just stop. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, can we just stop? It's all a distraction to keep us from them taking our money and our stuff and taking our power and taking our languaging and fractioning us off into separate languages. And let's just stop fractioning off just our languaging itself. So in essence of doing that, I actually did that for dramatic purposes more than I really care. I just love you guys. Good to see everybody on a Sunday. And white allies is my trigger word for sure. But my happy space is here with you guys. So thank you.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Okay. So the reason I use the term white allies is because I sought out Black people early on, and I was part of their group, which they set up, which was the White Ally Toolkit. And since they are the victims in this case, I'm letting them take the lead. So if they are telling me this is the way we're structuring it, I'm going to go with them and let them do that. The same way I would do with any aggrieved party in any circumstance. You tell me how I can help you. If I really want to help, I'm going to do it your way. So I just wanted to clear that up.
I just want to say, Stacy, I'm putting you down with all my Black friends. You are part. If you love Black people, you're part of the Black community, and you can be us. You don't have to be them and they. That's all I'm saying. Is I'll put you into the community. If you need a wristband, I'll give you one for the Black community. If you want to be a part of the Black community.
I'm just me. I'm just
okay.
me.
Exactly. You don't need a them and they. You're Stacy. Hello.
No, but if you're laying on the ground and I come up to you, I'm going to say, what do you need me to do? Not what do I want to do for you? Here's these great pair of boots. Please wear these boots because your feet will be warm and I want you to have these boots. No, I'm going to ask you, what do you want me to do if I want to help?
And you don't care about them and they, you just care about that person, correct?
Yes. I
Like
care
if
about
they're
that
an
person.
old person or a young person, you don't care. Or if they're a poor person or a rich person or a Black person or a white person, they're just a person.
That is correct. Again, I'm taking the lead of the Black leaders that I've been listening to and talking to. And rather than being insulted when they tell me that, if they correct me, like, for example, one of the things that they've suggested is that when us white allies get triggered by something because we feel like, we're being misunderstood, they recommended that we talk it out with other white people to get those emotions out and to get ourselves to a place where we're not triggered and then come back to the table. I'm fine with that. As far as I'm concerned, they're running the show in this, you know. To me, it's very similar to what I see. I'm going to move it into technology, because I see a lot of people that really want to do good in the world, that are involved in technology, and they're creating all these things that they think are great, but they don't always ask the people that actually they're trying to empower, what do you need? So to me, it's like the same thing. If people want to help, they need to really take into consideration if they're doing what makes them feel good to do and that's why they're helping, or if they truly want to help, then I think people know what they need. They've spent more time thinking about it than I have, that's for sure.
Some people love coloured people of all colours, like yellow people, Chinese, Asians, Africans, Maoris, and Caucasian people from Europe wide. Some of them are olive. It's a matter of not being not distinguishing by discriminating, loving all people, regardless of the colour of their skin, because that's discrimination, racial discrimination. So that's where it's at. If we allow those people to keep us on that subject and topic all the time, we're only playing into their game. So the thing to do is to believe what you believe and do it in your life. Practice what you preach. So I expect other people to treat me as I would treat them, with regard to whatever their prejudices are, if they have some. But I don't like to use them. They're something that it runs against the grain of logical rationality to treat somebody different just because of their race. They're another human being. We're all human beings. We're all in the same boat. We're all the same species of life. If we want to get along, that's the way we've got to approach it. I like that idea that Sam gave us, rationality too. It's a scientific principle in there. If we keep our emotional biases and opinions out of the picture, we can get along a lot better, I think. Over.
I just want to say that I dislike people of all colors. There are people I dislike of all shapes, sizes, genders.
So I'm going to turn the telescope around a little bit, which is sort of my favorite thing to do. So I don't think any of this stuff is new. It's just we're becoming aware. Once upon a time, these things went on in private between people transactionally or with a group around an individual or under cover of night, or 99% of the truth of human beings behaving the way they behave and saying the things they say and doing the things they do were not known and visible and circulated and retweeted and reposted and made visible. And so part of my orientation to all of this is who we are and this is what we've got. Like, this is the truth of our starting place. And I can't think of any positive or constructive reason to really reject any of it as the primary driver or motivation or starting point for anything. Like because if I'm going to a place of rejection or judgment, then I'm feeding the polarization and adversity and conflict that seems at the root of all of this stuff. So if I stop centering around rejection or judgment, then what's the alternative? What do I replace that with?
Well, you could make the people who aren't on camera, you can make their icons shown, because that would be the difference. Because then you wouldn't reject or replace them, and you could see them. I don't think I finished that point, but I do feel that, you know, we do make a lot of decisions that we don't revisit. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, there's.
Well, I'm not sure I understand your point about the icon. Like you've chosen this Phoenix-like thing as your graphic, right?
Well, Gertrude's here as well, and she's just a name. She can choose what she wants.
Yeah.
But
So,
I'm saying, I'm not sure what. I guess what I'm saying is when it's recorded. You know what? I think I'm totally mixed up because I don't watch a whole lot of the recordings. I can see the icons on the screen, so I think it's a matter of everybody chooses for themselves whether they can see the icons on the screen. And what you produce is
yeah. I mean, if I'm in, you know, speaker view versus, you know, gallery view, if that's what you're talking about.
Can I just
But
add that point?
but I mean, Zoom represents everybody that's in the session one way or another.
Yeah, no, I think I'm wrong about that.
Not all the time, not visually. So there is a setting that says hide non-video participants. And everybody has that setting, and you can actually choose to see whether or not you want to see a black square with a name or not, okay? So when people decided to not show themselves, I've actually, in the past, okay, just decided, hey, let me just not show non-video participants so that the people who are here get a bigger representation so we can actually see their features better, because, you know, a lot of people value the feedback of facial expressions, body language, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I've just by default historically had my setting, okay? We could actually expose it. We could actually change it differently. I was opting in favor of, hey, if somebody doesn't want to be seen, okay, fine. They don't want to be seen, okay?
Yeah, I've always sort of defaulted to at least having somebody's present, elected, represented. I had an experience with a corporate client the other day where we were because all the corporations in the world basically cashiered Zoom when they had their problem. And so everybody went scrambling for alternatives. And this person had chosen Blue Jeans, which was apparently allowed by the overlords, by their IT department. And in Blue Jeans, if a person doesn't have a camera, they're invisible. You can't tell that somebody is there. And other than looking at the body count number next to the participants button. And I find that really problematic, because whether somebody's here with a camera or not doesn't mean they're energetically not contributing their presence, their time, their attention. And it's important, you know, at least to me, that be known and represented.
Yeah, so I think these are more administrative type topics but there's no real forum for that as well unless we meet like off grid. And I think Josh has also been an advocate of trying to figure out where is what, and as far as the recordings and, you know, what this group has. But we kind of ebb and flow from administrative things to way out esoterical things. So this is a wide-ranging group, but I do think having format a little bit more consistent. So I'm going to go look at some other videos, but yeah, I think Sam, there might be a way to even game the system a little bit more. Like Doug says, there's no gaming the Blue Jeans one because they just knock you out. But this one, we could put like meaningful pictures. And, you know, I got by default, I have a Phoenix, but I was thinking about actually broadcasting another screen. So why can't my square be screen shared? in order for me to do that, I actually have to take my camera, point it at a computer, and screen share, caveman style.
Well, actually, not. This is sort of technical and out of unblocking. I'd love to get back to the center of where we were, but if you do share screen and share a video, you can affect your background effectively by setting your background default. Like I have this Simpsons background. You could have a background that's a video.
Yeah, well, I think Barn Racing is a good place for these kinds of discussions.
Good
but,
idea.
Yeah, and as well, I just wanted to mention it because I do feel that as someone who wants to be more of a podcaster, but I want to have graphic influence on the show. I don't want to have personal influence on the show. So I'd like to be able to show graphics and do things, and I think we could do more sharing. But it depends on the day, who's there. Again, back to the norms of what we expect. There's not a whole lot we expect, but we do expect Doug to host the show and moderate it. So continue on.
Alex?
I just wanted to mention that the conversation we had the other day was playing on my mind all night, and it was the three questions of the where are we now, where do we want to go, how do we get there? And it was from Kyla's Tallanaya conversation on Saturday that came up, and it was part of the richer conversation we had, which is worth going back to look at. Over.
It kind of does relate to space, though, and that's kind of where I was segueing to, but I don't want to get into the technicalities. But yeah, I think format could go a long way in different types of agendas, and I've been talking about that for some time. And I don't know, like the idea I mentioned to Stacy, and she liked that idea. If we could speak more succinctly, if we could, I think another thing I thought about is actually writing down what I'm about to say in the chat, and then when I get my turn to speak, just go back to the chat, because that's a way that you can doubly record it. And if it's important enough to say, you won't forget it, and you can. It's a lot of little tricks. It's hard to take part in a conversation with more than 2 or 3 people. I haven't heard much from Kayla or Gertrude. And Heiner had a fire burning still.
I think Kayla is not with us anymore, so Josh could not really. Oh, she is.
Yeah.
I shut up.
We've all got a fire burning.
I'm just listening.
Not all of us have a fire burning. Not all of us want to participate, even if we are triggered with several of these. But I'm very glad to be here and listening. I can get a much better overview when I'm not talking. Just generally means I'm not thinking of anything that's happening with me. I'm listening to what's happening here. To say that the conversations are repeating, yeah, of course they are, Colin. But do remember what you were doing this time last year to what you're doing this time this year. the smart, dumb person's problem. It's not a problem. Are you listening to yourself? This is a general to everybody. When you're talking or just about to talk or you finish talking, how do you justify or not justify what you've said? Or you thought even. Can you justify what you thought? You really want the truth? The truth lies within, and it is in the thought of the person thinking. I see a hot girl. I'm not going to tell her she's a hot girl. What's my justification for thinking it if I'm not going to speak it?
Evolution.
Evolution got fuck all to do with my testicles.
Do you need
I tend to disagree.
do you need a justification for thinking something? I mean, you thought it because you thought it.
No,
Why judge it if you're not speaking it?
just means you're not in control of your thinking.
I don't know
Very-
that that's true.
Yeah, we are not our thoughts. Sorry.
That the girl had some
And
questions.
what are we? I think, therefore I am. If I'm not thinking what
We're
I am,
choosers. We're choosers.
you're choosing thoughts.
Well, we can choose to follow a thought or we can choose to bury it. Oh, I can't think.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So you are your thoughts.
No, you're not. You have an option to play out roles that come to you because we're not exactly sure about this thoughts thing. That's called the hard problem.
That's exactly what I'm saying, and you're saying it in a different way. So
Maybe.
we come to the slightly different outlook on things, and that's what I'm talking about.
I should say your thoughts don't necessarily have to rule you. And I think Sam was talking, people who think in binary, they do that.
We come back to what I said. We are having a repeat conversation because one of us is telling the other one that you're not saying what I'm saying. I'm complete.
I think that's a really good point, Jazz, because I think my intention is to carve out a space where we can plant that seed and come back and look at it grow and see, if it's what we thought it was. But typically we just throw them out the window and it's gone.
My problem is that I made a statement that you've ignored completely. If you cannot catch what you're thinking, then you cannot even go to the next step and say, either I am what I think or I am not what I think. Or am I even in control of my thoughts? Do I want to be in control of my thoughts? Or do I want to stay where I am and I keep repeating the same conversations and add or take away just a little bit to justify having that conversation? I'm complete.
Yeah, I thought you were actually with me on that one. As I was mentioning that I tend to want to write down in the chat what I want to say before I say it.
Thought that I hold back.
Guys, I want to interrupt both of you because Alex raised his hand. Alex raised his hand. Hold on. Alex raised his hand, and it's been a tennis match.
That's fair enough, Dougie, but let me just finish saying this little bit. The justification of saying or not saying something. So, as I think I've lost that one. Yes. Now you're assuming that I was with you on that one. And I'm assuming that you were with me on that one. And one of us is either ahead of the other one or not.
Yeah, mismanaged space.
Which one is which one? Who's going to decide that? That is the question. I'm complete.
Alex?
This issue about critical thinking and emotional intelligence reminds me of the times I've meditated, and then after that session it felt wonderful because I've cleared the monkey chatter from, I've cleared the mental activity from my mind, basically. It cleared out a cluttered room so there was some space, creating space. And then the critical thought can follow a more gentle path, I believe, when it involves the heart. If I don't include my heart in the thinking process, I tend to become too analytical, and the issues just keep getting, I go down a rabbit hole and the problematic issues grow bigger. But if I include my heart in the thought process, I can listen to my intuition and the power that created the universe, or whatever that is a greater power than me, always will be. So there we are. I can use that. I can pull that card out of the pack whenever I need it, and use critical thought, critical emotional intelligence, which is a great help. And that doesn't happen unless the heart is involved in the thought process, I guess. So there, that's what I've got to contribute to the conversation. Over.
May I say something?
Sure.
I think this is a fascinating town square to me. You know, Colin uses the word show. I use the word town square. And I like that term because you never know who's going to show up and how they're going to be, and whether or not they had a good day, or whether or not they had dinner, or whether or not they're, their dog's yapping at them, or you don't really know. So people come with all kinds of energies, thoughts, etc. And it's a great place to understand how to interact in light of that. For me, it's a great place for me to understand, where can I actually lean in to try to figure out what is true, and where can I just sit back and just, watch it happen. And Jaswinder does a lot of watching and listening, but sometimes, he does lean in. So it's usually at a certain point where he's thought about a lot of what's gone on. Which goes back to a theme which hasn't really made an appearance in the last 6 or 9 months from me, by the way. And that is this notion of personal presentation. No one shows up at these things. And if you're conscious how you present yourself, not just, whether or not you've showered, whether or not you have a suit on, whether or not you're standing up straight, but internally, are you open? Are you curious? Are you generous? Do you want to know the truth? Do you want to get to know somebody? Do you have an agenda? Do you, have a anger that you're carrying from something else? That awareness lets one understand, okay, so why did I use this word rather than that word? Why did I go on for 3 minutes versus, 30 seconds? Why did I try to talk, 4 times in succession? Because for some reason, I think that person didn't get it. So I have to hammer the point home, All of that is driven by what's happening inside, which if we're aware of it, we choose consciously, we can still do exactly every one of those behaviors I just mentioned. But it's different when you're unconscious and still do those behaviors. So that level of awareness, I think, is what each of us, or at least, sorry, let me not speak for you, what I am trying to strive for, and I think some of you are trying to strive for. Some, I'm saying some. I won't say we. So I do think that, in this notion of what we're trying to do together, there's the interpersonal stuff, there's the intrapersonal stuff. And that, by the way, is fundamental to what I was calling the COI. That's why the COI is not defined by what happens between people, in my opinion. It's what happens when we show up a certain way and connect with others that we see, they're showing up in a similar way. I want to connect with that person. That's why the COI is written as a number of personal practices, not as a collective, charter or rules of engagement. That's exactly counter to why I did it that way. So I just wanted to invite that consideration, because just as I thought way back 6, 7 years ago, it is not necessary for everybody to show up the same way. But I do find myself more effective and more resonant and more, high energy to connect with certain people that do show up a certain way. And that's why it's an opt-in practice. That's why it's a self-awareness with opt-in. And that's the invitation. Consider that. And just wonder, I think that you were, I took your questions with a little bit of puzzlement, because I personally don't believe that I am my thoughts. You know, my thoughts are visitors. They come and go, and those thoughts are created by things that, you know, happen around me. You know, if this thought, you know, slams up against that thought and creates a different thought, okay, that thought could either be invited to stay, or I could just let it go. And that happens a lot. It happens probably hundreds of times a second, you know, with all my perceptions and feelings and thoughts and et cetera. So it's a question, I think, of which thought you want to invite to stay and which one you want to just, you know, let float by. Or you let it float by 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and then you finally realize, oh, that was a useful thought. I'm going to invite it to stay this time. I think that process is interesting. But I'm not the thoughts. I am the
I'd like to interrupt Sam and just say that I think Jazz was one node more ahead of us on that. If you wanted to abstract away,
now I'm triggered. Now you're speaking for me.
No, I'm saying when I had the exact same thing I was trying to say, and when Jazz came back, what I heard him say, and he can tell, he's talking at a more abstract level that we're both the thought that we reject and we don't reject. So that's his discussion.
I don't even care about this question of identity. I don't really care. I don't give another thought about who I am.
About sovereign identity.
The question is, I mean, yeah, legal rights, that's a different question, but that, you know, I don't consider that on a daily basis, you know.
I think that's a big thing going forward, and with consent.
You can do consent without legalities. I think consent is a much bigger notion.
Well, we could talk
anyway,
about that.
There's a lot of things.
Another
We're
IT thing.
talking now. I'm aware of that, so I want to, you know, shut up for now.
If the point is deep enough, which Colin thinks it is, perhaps it is worth driving it home sometimes rather than letting it go. Because if it's let go now, today, when we revisit a similar conversation, will we end it at the same point again? Or will we add a little bit? Or will we try to put a whole chunk onto it? Philosophers have pondered this question for many, many millennia. We haven't always been thinking creatures. And here we are, we're doing the same pondering that's been going on for thousands of years. And don't forget, for thinking at that level to occur, we had to get to a state where there was enough food left over for somebody to be able to sit and think and do nothing. And that's a penalty on its own. Okay, today, to make a point even deeper, there is a lot of the conversations that flip from the personal to the general. Somebody will make a general point and then flip it to, well, this is what happened with me, or I did this and I did that. So in its essence, trying to justify a general point being made that because I did it or it happens to me, therefore it must stand. Not true. The heart versus the deep thinking syndrome. Unfortunately, Alex doesn't remember a lot, and he keeps repeating the same conversation. Well, because we're a kind bunch, we let him get away with it, even though we do remember that that's his standby. But if we don't remind him, we're not being any kinder to him by reminding him that you've said that, and you keep saying it. We're not actually actuating his memory. And that's what I said to him 3 years ago, near enough. I will help you. And I meant that. And when he does that, if he wants to engage his heart, I'm quite willing for him to engage his heart till it pumps so hard that it gets his blood pressure up, and then he will remember. Heart memory, I'm all for it, if you know how to use it. So it's a lot of cases of learning how to use it and implement it. And do we want to have this conversation at the same level again? Is the same question that we'll end with, no doubt, next time, but hopefully it'll be deeper. I'm complete.
Josh?
Are we doing our checkouts?
Actually, we are. We're heading toward top of hour. So you raised your hand. I figured you'd like to do a share, and yeah, start us
Yeah.
on checkout round.
Yeah, maybe I can transition over to that direction just because I was going to keep the conversation going, but I'll start closing it off. I've just been thinking a lot about how groups can interact in a way that feels good for everyone, and how to create vision statements, mission statements, communities of impact, those type of things. And having a focus is something that really helps as a group so that we all have a common purpose. And it would be so nice to just have a common focus so we can all ease into that and feel that blanket of security around that common purpose. And even if it just looks like, how can we add and contribute to, as opposed to take away? If that's just a simple common purpose, and that's my checkout, is ways that ask not what your group can do for you, but what you can do for your group. And with that, I'm complete.
I love that.
Mr. Kennedy, Senior, shot for similar thoughts, no doubt. If you ask neither question, you get nowhere. And if you ask both questions, there's a conflict. Both questions have to be justified. Depends on where you want it to end, I suppose. I justify that by saying, I would like everybody to improve. It doesn't matter what their level is or was. Everybody can improve. And if you're going to keep everybody in the comfort zone by being nice to them all the time, you're not going to improve. Not at all. There is no justification for that behavior. We've discussed this so many times. Growth lies in outside the comfort zone. You've seen umpteen diagrams of it. But when you come on here, let's be nice to each other. Let's be very kind. The world has gone and destroyed itself hiding behind that little statement. Let's be kind. Don't shout. You're killing my family. Yes, but you don't have to shout about it. You're listening. I'm complete.
There's a technique used by some of the ancient tribes to overcome anxiety and fear in times of crisis. And it's simply putting your hand over your heart like that. And just placing your hand over your heart like that in that position, and do a few deep breaths. Count up to 15 or something. Over.
I'll check out. I went from the thought of what thought do I choose to follow to realizing that for me, I think the most important question isn't so much what the question is, but why am I asking it and why am I choosing to engage in answering it? And nice seeing everybody. I'm glad I made it here.
Any other parting words before I do mine?
I'll go.
Sam?
In my memory, I think there was a moment way back early 2018 where this notion of discomfort or uncomfortableness first appeared. And I was rather surprised at that. I was surprised that it wasn't seen as an opportunity to understand or to move forward in just winter speak, but that it was, in a sense, a violation of a safe space. And I think it's taken us another couple of years to really understand that phenomenon as a group. And I will say that as a group, okay? Because individually, we've each had our own understandings of that for the last couple of years. For me, I think think of us as sitting on a trail. I don't think of us as on a path walk, where there's one direction over there and another direction over there. I think of us as rather in this very large circular town square. And I have a value that's represented by this particular spot, perhaps. Somebody else is over there, somebody else is over here, somebody else is over there. And each of us is trying to grow our own sense of what those values represent to each of us. So I don't see it as quite so linear. I see it as more where we choose to focus. And to me, there's a notion, and it sounds like a higher value, and the word value I think is inadequate for it, which is to allow all of this to take place. And that word that I'm using for that is coexistence. See, I'm now beyond thinking of coexistence as a value. I would call it a practice, perhaps, but the words practice, value, principle, those are all inadequate for me to express that notion. Because then somebody says, oh, that's just another value. Well, it's the one that allows all of the others to reach their own potential and to reach their own settling point. Even love is not that. I think coexistence is broader than love in the way I'm conceiving it. So if nothing else, these last couple of years has really sunk deep for me this notion of coexistence as one of the most important things that I could be working on. And I'm here trying to demonstrate some of that by disagreeing, sometimes badly, sometimes well, but always with an attempt to try and improve. And I'm willing to be on the record when I'm disagreeing badly, because that's how I showed up. I chose to show up that way. It's on the record. I shouldn't be saying, therefore, I don't want any of the rest of you to be seen because I showed up badly. That to me is power over. So if you don't want to show up badly, show up well in your own sense of whatever that means. But don't show up and then say, please, delete that. And I don't want the rest of you for those 45 seconds or whatever to be seen in that moment either. I'll conclude with that.
That's debatable.
Anyone else? Going once, going twice?
I always thought I know we're not supposed to respond to other people's checkouts.
No, you're not, so don't.
But I'm just saying that I have a feeling that
no, you're not, so don't.
Right? a pause, yeah, as if there's rules. A pause button would be nice.
Yeah, that we don't have.
What about an internal pause button?
That would be a terrific skill to be demonstrated.
All you need for that is just to remind yourself that you don't have a pause button. Alba.
Gertrude?
Yeah, I just
wanted to say that it was not that I didn't want to be on record. I just was a little bit distracted, and I didn't want you to see me going back and forth and things like that. So interesting conversation, and Doug knows a little bit, and Kayla as well. Maybe I would like to contribute a bit when I'm not, when I'm at present to exactly that conversation. Good to see you, and have a great week.
So I'm going to bring up the rear. I'm assuming everybody else is done. Yes? No? Going. So I really love Josh's suggestion about what if, point of focus. What if there was a point of focus? And I'm doing a lot of work with somebody around sort of a meta paradigm that she's evolved around the 5 elements. You know, there are a lot of ancient traditions that focus up on the 5 elements, and it's proving to be a pretty powerful journey. One of the things that we're doing is working with a new organization that's in the process of forming. And one of the first things that organization is asked to do is for everybody involved to feel into and think into what tree might best represent the collective effort. And so I'm going to put that question on the table for everybody here for next Sunday, between now and next Sunday, to feel into, think into. What tree would each of you envision being the best representation of what we are here in GCC Sunday Unblocking? Let's make it really specific. And Sunday, come bearing exhibits or pictures or sharing about what tree you picked and why. Just as a not for nothing shits and giggles. And I look forward to, what you bring. And in the meantime, huge gratitude for all of you being here and being willing to slog through and fight through the collective effort to figure out how maybe we do us differently and better, which is the essential question of Sunday Unblocking. Today was, for me, a working session. Like, that's how I experienced it and felt it. And but there were some pieces that were sort of interesting that I'm going to carry with me. So thank you. And have a wonderful remainder of Sunday, Alex Monday, and an incredible week. And hopefully I'll see you all next week. And keep up the good fight.